Hi, David. It's good to talk to you again.
Great to be here.
Now, David, you were there at that news conference between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. What was it like to watch it?
Trump naturally went first, and I think, all eyes were on him, really. He was the commanding figure, centre stage. And this room, unlike where these events normally happen, the East Room is quite cramped and intimate. People like me were sort of standing up against a wall. I got told off by a White House staffer for trying to rest my laptop on a very ornate mantelpiece. And it got underway, and it was a very long and winding speech by Donald Trump, who, as ever, enjoyed being the centre of attention.
Was there a contrast to you between Netanyahu and Donald Trump standing next to each other? Netanyahu, a man who's trying to hold on to power, and Trump, a man who's tightening his grip on power.
Politically, the affinity between them is striking these days. In the rise of authoritarianism we're seeing globally, these are two of the big players. They have a lot in common there. And indeed, some would argue a rise of ethno-nationalism. These two men are pioneering this. And of course, something else they also have in common is the shadow of criminal convictions or allegations in their home countries, and have motives to cling on to power. I did watch Netanyahu, who was forced to stand at this lectern for, I think, a good half hour while Trump talked on and on. Certainly when it finally was his turn to speak, he lavished praise on Trump as the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House. And he added for emphasis, it's not even close, which is a Trumpian line. So these two men do have a lot in common. It did feel like looking at birds of a feather, and what a contrast from the United Nations just a week earlier, where, of course, there was a big walkout for Netanyahu, and the two of them seemed very isolated compared to all those European countries who were recognizing a Palestinian state.
I mean, they were there to announce this plan for ending the war in Gaza, this awful, awful war that the UN has described as having marks of genocide. Just days ago, Netanyahu was talking about finishing the job in Gaza, and now he's talking about accepting some sort of plan to end the conflict. Do we know what's changed, why Donald Trump has intervened now?
Yeah, I think certainly going into this meeting, that was the question. Can Trump persuade Netanyahu to close the gap between them and accept the American proposal? And it did appear that Trump succeeded in that. And I think on closer inspection, it's sort of understandable. To be honest, Israel is not being asked to make major concessions here. It would get a lot, which includes the release of all the remaining hostages, Hamas giving up its arms, giving up all its political power in Gaza. Israel would remain a presence there, at least on the perimeter. There's actually quite a lot of wins here for Israel and Netanyahu, and I think he may have made the calculation this is a moment where he can assuage his right-wing government and cut his losses and call an end to the war here, and have that full US backing, which is always useful.
It has 20 points. I want to take a look at some of them, but the overarching issue here is that Hamas wasn't involved in drafting it, and yet Hamas has to agree to it.
That's right. And I think that may also be a crucial part of Netanyahu's calculation. It's a win-win situation for him. Either Hamas agrees and the war is over, and that's great for Israel in certain respects, or what's perhaps more likely is that Hamas turns it down and Israel is allowed to continue pursuing this war. And Donald Trump said he would give full backing to go on and destroy Hamas. And there was some quite chilling language from Netanyahu on that score as well. We can do this the easy way or do it the hard way. Because indeed, what was missing here was any consultation with Hamas in advance, any sort of input from them on this plan. And we still await a full response from Hamas. In the initial hours, they just said, we haven't seen this. We don't really know what it is. And there are plenty of reasons to believe that they won't like it. After 20 years having to surrender political power, in the past they've said that's a non-starter. Having to give up their arms, again, not very encouraging. And just the idea for Hamas that they would cede control to some kind of international committee, a board of peace that is chaired by Donald Trump with his record on human rights in the Middle East, and then backed by Tony Blair, who is well remembered as a notorious figure from the illegal invasion of Iraq and the war that waged there, and on various other counts. That may not be very appealing to Hamas on various metrics. I guess the calculation would be they may yield to the pressure of other Arab countries, and they may also feel they have to cut their losses because this war has been so devastating on their leadership.
Tony Blair was an interesting addition. I know that hasn't been widely welcomed because of his history. We're speaking Tuesday night for you, Wednesday morning for me. As you say, we don't have a response from Hamas. But I wonder, was there an element of political theatre around this, especially as Netanyahu said, even if Hamas accept the deal but don't stick to it or counter it, then Israel will continue to do whatever it wants.
Yeah, I mean, this was Israel and the US basically delivering an ultimatum. Do it our way or face the consequences. Do it our way or else. There was not much choice in this. And you mentioned political theatre. All the trappings are there of here are these two statesmen standing in this grand room in the White House at the heart of American power, trying to send this message, claiming at least that they have other Middle Eastern countries on side, and basically giving Hamas very little room to maneuver. And that fits with Trump's character. I mean, he loves this pageantry, this spectacle, this reality TV element. And we've seen before, he will announce something and claim this is great. I mean, his hyperbolic language at this press conference included, this is one of the great moments in the history of all civilization. I mean, he's not just talking in years and decades, he's now into thousands of years. But it was, as some have noted, it was more like a plan drawn up on the back of an envelope rather than a substantial document.
And it's almost like a framework. There's not a lot of detail there. But you do mention the international oversight body, the Council of Peace, that was described, and Trump is meant to run that. I mean, this is a man that talked about turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. Do we have any idea what his role would even be in that sort of council?
Not much. I mean, he referred to it again on Tuesday at one or two events, but we've been told very little about, would it just be some kind of symbolic convening role? Would he actually get involved in the nitty-gritty of policy? The latter is perhaps slightly hard to believe, knowing Trump and how many other hats he's wearing. There is an important point in here, though, about yes, earlier this year there was another press conference with Netanyahu where famously or infamously now Trump did make those remarks about turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, and the very strong implication was that Palestinians would be forcibly driven out, basically ethnically cleansed. And this proposal actually has a point that says that will not happen. Palestinians will not be forced to leave. So is that an achievement then? As little detail as there is here, just having that on paper, noting that Israel will not annex or occupy Gaza, that's a win that Donald Trump has managed to extract? Yes, I mean, and of course, it all depends where you're starting from, and it's all relative. And one might say we are still very far from a real long-term two-state solution, and all the things that really need to happen for fundamental reform. But that's incremental progress of sorts. I guess that the ethnic cleansing seems to be off the table at least for now. And
It's a very low bar.
It's a very low bar, yeah.
A lot of people are saying it's kind of the only thing on the table. There's nothing else. So
Right.
that's potentially why it's been welcomed in some ways.
Yes, that's right. There are other aspects of this plan, such as an amnesty for members of Hamas who committed to peace, and those who wanted to leave would be able to do so to receiving countries. We don't know who those countries would be or how that would work. There's obviously many questions about what happens to members of Hamas who don't want to surrender, who don't want to give up fighting for this cause, and that's as you mentioned, that's both the positive and the negative of a framework. It looks great, but it can leave lots of ambiguities and lots of unanswered questions.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you is about the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump versus Trump's relationship with the Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, because you watch these world leaders come in and go. Do you get a sense that this kind of represents Trump losing patience with Netanyahu and feeling like he values his relationship a bit more with the Arab states and he wants to give them something that they can hang on to?
There has been an interesting dynamic going on this year. I mean, notably when Trump made his first foreign trip, it was not to Israel, it was to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE. And frequently he will praise those leaders and how well he gets on with them. And on the other hand, Trump has publicly expressed great frustration with Netanyahu at times, partly the attack on Iran, but especially more recently the attack on Qatar. And there's been a fair amount of reporting in the Washington media about how sometimes not only Trump, but the people around him are tearing their hair out over Netanyahu's conduct. Even for them, he's an extremist and an unreasonable person, and they'd be glad to turn the page on all this if they could.
That's really interesting that the White House, Trump's White House, is struggling with Netanyahu and that relationship. It's the only deal on the table right now, if we can even call it a deal. Do we have any idea how it's being received in Gaza, in Israel?
I would not claim to be an expert on the views on the ground at the moment. I think, from what I've read, a bit of a mixed reception. Everybody has that duality of maybe feeling there's a just cause and they should go on fighting, but at the same time, a sense of exhaustion and looking for a way out. I think that'll be a test for Hamas. They are coming under pressure from some of their own population to just draw a line under this. Obviously, a lot of mixed feelings in Israel, a lot of criticism of Netanyahu. Some of the families of the hostages have been some of his biggest critics. I think they certainly welcome the effort, the initiative, but they have a lot of the same questions as everyone else.
It's an all or nothing deal. So if Hamas reject the deal, Netanyahu said Israel would finish the job by itself, quote. But from what you know of Trump, do you think this would be the end of the line? Do you think Donald Trump would do what he kind of said he would and say, okay, Israel, do what you want now?
I think Trump would probably lose patience and lose engagement and move on to something else. The one thing perhaps that does continue to engage him is this obsession with winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And he brought it up yet again on Tuesday at a speech to US military generals in Virginia, which I happened to attend. And his very spurious claim, which has been fact-checked, is that he's already successfully ended 7 wars. And so, as he put it, if he could resolve this in Gaza, that would be 8 wars in 8 months. The Guardian and others have done good articles, unpicking this 7 wars claim. As we sort of touched on earlier, there is this feeling of a setup here, an ultimatum, the US and Israel clubbing together and creating this trap for Hamas where either you accept these terms or we can blame you for turning it down and continue to fight on. This is the US and Israel trying to portray themselves as the reasonable ones. Look, we came up with this plan. If you turn it down, then it's on you. Even though, of course, Hamas had no role in the plan at all.
Let's just say, for argument's sake, that Hamas does accept the plan. One of the provisions is that the UN will become involved in getting aid back in. Do we have any idea how long it would take for the fighting to stop and for food and healthcare to return to this devastated region?
No, hard to say. I would have thought it might be relatively swift. We have seen aid turned on and off at various points, and certainly there have been moments when Israel has been the great barrier to more aid coming in. These are some of the tricky questions because let's just say, for example, Hamas's leadership accepts this deal, but maybe a lot of their members don't. That could get messy. As we know from history, a war doesn't necessarily end with a click of a finger and everybody puts their arms down. It's hard to estimate just how long it would take.
Why do you think this matters to Donald Trump? Is this what Trump-led diplomacy looks like, or does he genuinely want to be known as someone who ended this conflict?
Yeah, it's a great question. What are his motives on the world stage? There's some evidence from Trump's responses and what he says that he genuinely has this visceral reaction to the sight of children starving, to bloodshed, a sort of fundamental hatred of war. I do, however, go back to just the default knowledge of Trump that he is a narcissist in so many ways. He is so egocentric. He does this with a sense of attention. I think probably the primary motivation is just the glory of being able to achieve this, being regarded as a historic figure, being able to add it to his list of victories that we've just heard about his presidential library being established in Florida. That will be the keeper of his legacy. And nothing he would love more, of course, than the centerpiece of that exhibit being in a glass case, gilded, the precious Nobel Peace Prize that he won in 2026.
David, thank you so much for talking to us about just one of many moments in this intractable conflict. Thank you.
Thank you.